How many times have we all heard this?
Women are emotional. If you're going to deal with women, they are going to be emotional. Some more so than others, but that's how they come. They are going to, their emotions, they're going to run their logic through their emotions. Even the smartest of them. That's how they come.
Men tend to forget that women typically are emotionally wired or more emotionally wired.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when she comes to you and expresses a concern, if that concern does not line up in your head logically, men tend to dismiss it. Okay?
Facts.
And they don't consider how she's feeling. And I want men to understand, you have to learn that we have to accept men and women are different. We are just built differently, and in understanding our differences, we can create more harmony with each other. When that woman says to you, this is how I feel, it's not about your logic at that point, bruh. It's about how she feels. All right? And you got to tap into that in that moment. And if you say, well, how do I know she's not lying? Listen, if she's a good woman otherwise, then there's no reason to assume it's a lie right now. All right? If you know she has not been a problem for you, then don't project that negativity on her. Just take her as her expression at that moment.
Men are naturally wired to be logical, and women are naturally wired to be emotional. So there is a difference of natures between the man and between the woman. And if there is no understanding amongst both parties of the difference of natures and the purpose of why the male and the female has different natures, then there is going to be a fight. There's going to be a battle. And that fight is simply called a lack of understanding. Now, a lack of understanding occurs when you cannot, it's not that you won't, but you cannot put yourself into the mind of another person. In other words, what do people say? Put yourself in another person's shoes. So what happens often in relationships is that we see that the man, because he's naturally wired to be logical, what comes out of the woman's mouth makes absolutely no sense, because all he hears is emotion.
Now, I don't know about y'all, but I believed that for a really long time, right? Pretty much for the majority of my life. I never really stopped to think about what did it actually mean. But basically, the way that it's sold to us is that women aren't rational and men are logical. Women react with their feelings and men react with their logic, which is better. You would think you want a person that is thinking something through rationally. When you think a person is thinking emotionally, you think they're not making sound decisions. So that alludes to this idea that men are naturally born leaders and women are natural born followers. But two problems with that. A, it's not true on its face. And B, you need emotion for proper logic. Logic and emotion are inextricably connected. You cannot separate the two. You need your emotion to process logic, and you need to be to be empathetic. You need logic. It takes logic to be empathetic as well. So you need both. You can't separate the two. Men, however, we try to, and that's our problem. And that's why women are more in touch with their emotions, but also that's why women are more logical.
So what's your take?
Men are by far the more emotional and hysterical gender.
100% agree.
Yeah,
100%
right?
agree. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
men are always enraged.
Yeah, I think everyone experiences emotions and the emotional triggers, but men manage their emotions much more poorly. You know, and I think that historically people would say like, oh, women are more emotional because they're expressing their emotions and crying or whatever, right? But they're getting past it. They're processing it in a healthy way. We do not do that.
No, we don't. We punch walls, punch doors, punch each other.
Yeah, when we're sad, we're angry, and we're like, ah!
As a man, what is the worst emotion that you feel?
Sadness, because it's really hard to actually like feel it without just getting angry, you know, and being like, oh, like, I'm just stupid for being sad. You know what I mean? And then like, you know, it's stuff that men have essentially set up society.
That's a big bad thing.
That's a big bad thing, because look at where we're at today,
We're
right?
not in a good place.
And I think it's mostly because a lot of men with power are driven by their anger.
Also, those men are driven by their greed and their lack of empathy. So you put that together and it creates this deadly cocktail.
It's going to turn around, right? Or do we have to get off? Oh, sorry, ladies. Okay. I'm so sorry. Thank you. I mean, I'm a little bit pissed off that we got kicked off the train.
But you're really sad that we got kicked off the train.
No, I'm frustrated.
But frustration is a two-pronged thing. And you're more in touch with the angry part of yourself. So when you get frustrated, you're sad for a second, but then you blow right past it and you're like, "Fuck you, Abdullah, you this up for me."
How do you think men should cope?
Men should go to therapy, first of all, right?
100% disagree.
Men should exercise.
100% disagree.
And men should talk to other men about their feelings.
100% agree. Maybe have a sleepover with your boys.
No, you lost me. I really need that last couple hours at the end of the night for me, you know?
After you watch the movie and jerk off together, then you have quiet time.
Right. This is why I'm not crazy about house guests, you know?
I love his approach. I love what he was saying right there. And I agree for the most part that men just don't process our emotions properly. We don't allow ourselves to feel them because we're told not to feel them. We're told to be stoic. We're told to suppress them. And we are taught that if we do feel them, then it's a problem. We're a problem. There's something wrong with us because men don't feel that way, which leads to shame, which leads to anger. So we end up just being angry and we don't really have anybody specifically to be angry at because society kind of taught us how to be like this. So you end up being mad at everybody. So what about the claim that women are more emotional than men and men are more logical, right? We need to address that.
Yes, men are so emotional. In fact, there's a good argument to be made that men are more emotional than women. Let me give you just a brief summary of some of the research. For context, I just finished my PhD, which was about teenage boys' relationships with emotions. Generally speaking, baby boys are more emotionally reactive and expressive than baby girls in terms of their levels of fussiness and in their displays of joy.
But remember earlier when I played the clips, that woman said that women are hardwired to be more emotional and men are hardwired to be more logical. This gentleman is talking about babies. So if it's in babies, then wouldn't that mean we were actually more hardwired to be emotional?
That said, boys do tend to become less verbally expressive than girls by age 2, which is when language starts to develop. Multiple studies have found that boys tend to display greater emotional symptoms than girls do, such as this study where parents and kindergarten teachers identified boys as having greater levels of depression and separation anxiety than girls. And perhaps what I personally find the most fascinating studies are those that indicate that boys and men tend to experience greater bodily responses to emotional distress or to emotional events than women, even though they report experiencing less. For instance, this one study had men and women watch multiple movie clips where each clip was designed to elicit a specific emotion, and their heart rate was being monitored. Men either had higher heart rates or the same level as the women did when watching these clips, but afterwards, the men were way more likely to report experiencing less emotional intensity than the women. At the very least, there's a case that men don't experience their emotions less strongly than women, but that they describe or perhaps interpret their emotional experience as less intense than women do.
That is because we are taught to be stoic. We are taught to suppress. We are taught not to actually let it impact our conscious, right? It's subconsciously affecting us, but consciously we can't accept it. So we suppress it.
But here's the thing. I don't care at all about arguing whether men or women are more emotional than the other. But I do care when people use these conversations to weaponize emotions, often against women, to diminish their authority and write them off as irrational. And I do care when some people, more often men, view their emotions as problematic and so try to cut themselves off from those emotional parts of themselves. And there's this weird paradox that the more we try to suppress our emotions, the more we end up getting controlled by them.
So that analysis was perfect. It was beautiful. That's exactly what's going on. Men don't allow themselves to feel. We don't allow ourselves to just process our emotions, which leads us to be, like I said, angry. But then furthermore, when women do experience their emotions, we have this negative reaction to seeing women be emotional, right? And I think partly it's due to our jealousy that we aren't allowed to do that. Like we don't allow ourselves to do it. But B, it's to weaponize it against women and to undermine their authority or undermine their actual abilities, or capabilities. We want to downplay it so that they don't come off as strong or as competent. as we know them to actually be. And that is terrible and it's destructive. And everybody ends up losing in this scenario. It's not like men win and women lose. No, we all end up losing. Women end up losing more, but definitely we all end up losing collectively.
Dear men watching this, you are never allowed to insinuate that women are more emotional than men if you respond to feedback that's given to you with one of the two following things.
And this is how most men respond. Just so we're clear, I just want to set this up for you. This is how most men react.
I guess I'm just the worst husband ever, aren't I? Oh, well, I'm sorry I'm not perfect. It's childish and fucking immature, okay? Listen, we all have emotions, men and women. There's nothing wrong with them. But when they come up for us, are we able to keep our cool? Are we able to stay calm? Are we able to listen to feedback without letting shit go sideways? Because if your instinct is to respond with these absolutes, like, oh, I'm just the worst, aren't I? Or I'm not perfect. You know that that's not what she's saying. And you're trying to emotionally twist the conversation. Or you're just ill-equipped to actually constructively discuss what's on the table. You're better than that. And your marriage will be better for it if you stop responding in that way, take a breath, and try to actually have a conversation instead of flailing about like a toddler.
Using hyperbole, using extremes, arguing little points within the argument and deflecting, those are typically the responses that men have in those scenarios when they're being challenged in any way, shape, or form. They are not allowing themselves to express themselves in any healthy way. And so we end up lashing out at our partners in these very toxic ways. We say stuff like, so you're saying I never do this, or you're saying I always do that, and it's, we start to get caught up in the argument itself as opposed to just listening to what our partner is saying or what the other person is saying. Because it doesn't always happen with women. It happens even when men try to call out their friend or whatever the case may be, men also respond like that to men. It's we instantly revert back to gaslighting. And I often have to say this to men, but it's true. Like I tell men all the time, you can't gaslight me. You can't, not in these spaces. In real life, sure, I've been gaslit by plenty of people. But when it comes to this arena, this space, it's impossible. It's impossible. You can't do it. It'll never happen. But men don't understand that and they still try to do it. And that's when I get to see exactly what's going on, how men are falling short, how we are not taking accountability. I get to see it in these spaces all the time. If you guys aren't watching my lives, you definitely need to tune in because you get to see it play out in real time all the time. And you don't have to argue. It's me. So don't worry about it.
You want to know why she's emotional? It's because she tried logic already. She tried to be soft. She tried to be gentle. She tried not to scream. She tried not to cry. She tried not to stomp. And through all of that, you still looked at her as if she was stupid. You still told her everything that she just said was wrong. You still dismissed her. This is a result of that action. The quote says, I understand the perspective could be fact to me and fiction to you. So you mean to tell me that you strongly believe what you're saying is right, but when she had the exact same energy, you had the nerve to tell her she was wrong? Her perspective is always going to be fact to her, and it's always going to be fiction to you if you don't open your mind up to receiving that. Believing there's one cookie cutter way to move, believing that there's only one right answer is little nigga shit.
In these types of scenarios, I learned this a long time ago. Feelings are facts, right? Because there is no right or wrong answer. So if you feel a certain way, it's a fact because you do feel that way. Now, the fact can be, or the feeling can come from many different places. It doesn't mean that the origin of the feeling is legit or should be legitimized, but I do, you should recognize it as a fact. Like, okay, they really are feeling this way. Let's get to the bottom of the why. Let's, let me listen and let me try to see what's going on. But oftentimes we just shut down our partners, especially women, when they are telling us how they feel. We instantly revert to, like the other gentleman said in the video before, like, oh, I guess I'm the worst partner ever. I'm the worst husband ever. I don't ever do anything for you, because ultimately we don't want to hear it. We're not really there to grow. We're not really there to listen. We're not really there to be better. So we're just trying to get out of that situation as soon and as fast as possible. But all in all, if we could take a little bit of time and really just sit with it and try to listen to what our partners are saying and what other people are saying about us, we definitely have the capacity to grow and we can make our lives exponentially better. But at this point, it just seems like a lot of us aren't interested in it because in this system, it doesn't necessarily reward that. That's not something that is rewarded instantly. And we are all about instant gratification, and we are all about domination and manipulation. That is pretty much how men function, unfortunately. That doesn't mean we don't have to try more or we don't have to, strive to be better. But at this point, it is what it is, right? And I hate to say that.